If your claim is in the null hypothesis and you reject the null hypothesis, then your conclusion would be to do what? Let's think about this for a moment. If I have my null hypothesis and that actually contains my claim, and then I reject it, then I have rejected the claim. So I would choose there is sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the original claim. If your claim is in the null hypothesis and you fail to reject the null hypothesis, then your conclusion would be, okay, so what's changed here is just that I'm not going to reject the null hypothesis. So again, my null contains my claim, but I don't reject it. So then I have not rejected my claim because my claim is in the null. So I would say there is not sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the original claim. If your claim is in the alternative hypothesis and you reject the null hypothesis, then your conclusion would be, okay, so now what's changed here is the claim is not contained in the null anymore. The claim is contained in the alternative. So now I have H sub 0 and H sub A. My alternative contains the claim, and I am rejecting the null hypothesis, which means I have support for the remaining hypothesis. So there is sufficient evidence to support the original claim. The sample data support the original claim. If your claim is in the alternative hypothesis and you fail to reject the null hypothesis, then your conclusion would be, okay, so what's changed here is we're just not rejecting the null hypothesis. So we have H sub 0, whatever it is, some null hypothesis, and we didn't find enough evidence to throw it out. So we don't reject this, then we don't support the claim. Okay, so we would say there is not sufficient evidence to support the original claim. Now, all of these steps are summarized in the reference packet. On the third sheet here, we have a flow chart, which takes us through a decision-making process with determining your final conclusion. The first question is, does the original claim contain the condition of equality? The reason that is being asked is because if the claim does contain the condition of equality, so that means the claim is that it's equal or at most or at least, which would give us a less than or equal sign or a greater than or equal sign. So anything that has equality in it, not just the equal sign, that would be in the null hypothesis. So this is like asking, is your claim contained in the null hypothesis? If we say yes, then after rejecting the null hypothesis, we would say there is sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the claim. If we fail to reject the null hypothesis, then we would say there is not sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the claim. So notice in both of these two first possible conclusions, we're talking about whether or not there is enough evidence to warrant rejection of the claim. However, if your claim does not contain the condition of equality, it'll become your alternative hypothesis. And then if you do reject the null hypothesis, you will support the claim. And if you don't reject the null hypothesis, then you will fail to support the claim or you will not have sufficient evidence. So both of these last ones regard support of the claim, yes or no. And that's because the claim fell under the alternative.